Okay, hello everybody and welcome to Third Thursday. My name is Susan. Right off the bat, I just want to get into some Zoom housekeeping so that everyone has what they need and can enjoy the event. So today's event is closed captioned in English. So to turn that on, if you look at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a little icon that says CC, and you can turn that on and have English subtitles. We encourage everyone to use the chat today. Third Thursdays are all about engaging our community. So please say hello and let us know if you're a student or you're an employee and how you heard about it. And lots of chat is always great. We have some incredible speakers today, and we'll be doing a Q&A at the end. And I'm going to go through a bit more with that. But if you are wanting to ask a question, again, if you look at the bottom toolbar there, you can add your question into the Q&A tab. Don't put it in the chat, put it in the Q&A so we don't lose it amongst all of the chat. And then during the Q&A, obviously you can put it in that Q&A tab, or you can raise your virtual hand and we can allow you to talk. We all know we're in a webinar and not a meeting, so while we can't see all of you guys, we certainly still want to hear from you. Okay, so the housekeeping is done. I'm always super excited for Third Thursdays, and today is our very first Third Thursday, First Thursday edition, and we are happy to switch things up for the incredible speaker that we have today. So welcome to everyone who has joined Third Thursday before, and welcome to any of the new viewers. We're happy to have you here. Again, my name is Susan. I work on the college events team here at the college, and everyone knows I'm incredibly repetitive. Third Thursday is my favorite event that we organize because we really get to connect the community and hear from local artists and speakers and entrepreneurs, and just a lot of different ideas that help us look at the world in a different way. So a little bit about Third Thursday to start off. It's really all about sparking those ideas and creating community, as I just mentioned, and every month we hear from different experts that help us inspire and really empower us to become the people that we want to be, whatever that looks like. So for those of you that know, we've been doing Third Thursday for 5 seasons now, and it's a real collaborative event across lots of different departments on our Algonquin College campus. And so we have a little video that we're going to share just to let you see a little bit more about what the Third Thursday philosophy is all about. So Tim, I will ask you to play the video.
Hey Algonquin College, we're launching the 5th season of Third Thursday. Third Thursdays are conversations that spark ideas and create community. Every month, we invite local experts and innovators to share stories that inspire and empower listeners. Tune in on the third Thursday of every month from your home. We challenge you to change your space into a place, and we'll bring inspiring innovators from inspiring places to you virtually. Let's explore this new reality together. Students, employees, alumni, and community partners forge meaningful connections while learning from each other. The Third Thursday community is story-driven, curious, and collaborative, and we're not afraid of perspective shifts or pushing the envelope. We skip the small talk and dig deep into topics that matter. We're here to fuel dreams through dialogue and turn passion into purpose. Come and be a part of the story.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Tim. So it gives everyone a little bit of a better idea of sort of where we're coming from and how this all started. And then just one more piece from me before I pass it along. Everyone who has been before, we do a community soapbox at the end of these events. So obviously when we were in person, we literally had a soapbox that you were able to come and stand up and you can share any upcoming projects, or anything that you want to share with the college community. So we're still obviously trying to do that even though we're online. So once the Q&A is over, I will open it up to everyone who is on the call today. And if you want to share anything, you're more than welcome. And obviously if you're shy and don't want to raise your hand, you can put it in the chat as well. But put your thinking caps on of anything that you'd want to share with this Third Thursday community, because you will have the opportunity and we do want to hear from you. Okay, so with that, I am thrilled for our speaker today, Ryan Gorrie, and we have Andrea Bassawin, our Director of Indigenous Initiatives, here to introduce Ryan. So I will pass it over to Andre.
Thank you, Susan. Welcome, everyone. Also, when the third Thursdays are live, Susan has a wall of donuts. So I miss those days as well. My name is Andrea Bassawin. I am the Director of Indigenous Initiatives here at the college. I am a Biniki, a member of the Odanak First Nation. And today I will like to introduce Ryan. Ryan is the architect of Algonquin College's Ishkadoan, and I'd like to take a minute to tell a story of the space. Ishkadoan is titled for Outdoor Courtyard. It's a gathering space, a fire vessel. We do some teachings out there. And places, some of the faculty members have used it to do some outdoor learning. So the space is really utilized quite a bit, and we bring external members, organization, companies in there too and do some teachings. We've also do fires in the evenings and to do storytelling, a lot with the Student Association this year as well. So, and also the Ishkadoan area has over 100 plants that are really cultural and historical significance to the indigenous people, but really around our Algonquin territory. We planted all these medicinal, nutritional, and cultural plants that are really here for our people. The structure that Ryan designed has become such a focal point on our campus aesthetically and physically that I always sit here and actually I'm looking at it right now and admiring it. So I'm always grateful to Ryan and the way he portrayed the story through the courtyard. And when you do go out there and look at it, look at the walls and the glass and the pitted waterfall that comes down the pillar, and it tells a story. And I won't go into it because I know Ryan will talk about that, and he's really passionate about that as well. So Ryan has been collaborating with Brooke McElroy since 2009, when he was retained as a key member of the design team for other award-winning designs such as the Spirit Garden in Thunder Bay, and formally joined the firm in 2016 to lead the Winnipeg office and the Indigenous Design Studio. He is a First Nation member of Bingwe Naishe Anishinaabe. Ryan strives to ensure the perpetuation of Indigenous culture throughout his creative opportunities, ranging from the crafting and traditional items for ceremonial use to large-scale landmark architecture. He is a licensed architect in Manitoba and principal of the firm Brooke McElroy. In 2018, Ryan's work was showcased in Unceded Voices of the Land at the Venice Biennale, along with the work of 17 other Indigenous architects and designers across Turtle Island. So with that, I would like to welcome Ryan and say thanks to Ryan for all the great work that he's doing on Turtle Island for Indigenous people and for non-Indigenous people to learn from. Ryan?
Miigwech, bonjour. Ryan Gorrie, Indigenous Kas, Nimiki Wikwe Dongan Donji, Danokioma, Treaty 1 territory. So I'm coming to you from Treaty 1 in Winnipeg today, the place that I've made my home in, but I'm originally from Thunder Bay. And as Andre mentioned, I'm a member of Bingwe Naishe Anishinaabe, which is a small First Nation on Lake Nipigon. And if anyone is familiar with Norvell Morrisseau, the woodland artist, that was his home reserve as well. So just for context to put us on the map. Very happy to be with you today and to share some of our work, not only at Algonquin, but other projects to kind of unfold how Indigenous culture can be translated through design. And so without further ado, I'll kind of present some of these projects. And the hope is that I'll talk for about 20 or 25 minutes, maybe less, but maybe we can also leave more room for questions at the end. So do the ceremonial sharing of the screen here. And I think you all can see that. I'm using two screens, so I'll probably be watching over here. I'm not ignoring y'all, but so I like to start my presentations with this slide, Bishkabiyang. The way I understand it is looking back to move forward. So on the left is my great-great-great-grandmother, and on the right is my daughter, and between the two are 7 generations. And so I have a responsibility both to the past and to the present, and in an active state of reclamation. So we talk about reconciliation in a lot of our day-to-day lives nowadays, but for me, it is really about that reconciliation with my culture, the things that have been lost through various forms of colonization. And it's not something of the past, but it's something that's ongoing in terms of how we address colonization, decolonization, indigenization. And so this is the framework from which I do my work. I want to be able to share with my children that they can see themselves reflected in the built environment, something that I didn't see growing up, and something that I think is really important for all Canadians to see, be part of, to advocate for, and to begin that idea of a true place of shared land, history, language, culture, and all the things that we hope for our children. So like I said, I'm going to go through a few projects, and I will definitely touch on Algonquin because it holds a special place for me. Like all projects, you'd mentioned, Susan, at the top that Third Thursdays has been happening, is in its 5th season, and it's been almost exactly 5 years since I actually kicked off the project at Algonquin. So really interesting timing. So the projects that I'm going to show are range from architecture to landscape architecture to public art. This first one, the Wendat Longhouses and Interpretive Center at Crawford Lake, something that I was a part of as an advisory role in the beginning. So the idea that this is an education center, an active archaeological site, and a place that sees about 70,000 visitors. So the opportunity to really share in the site, not only traditional form, but also contemporary form, and how we express that through materiality like mass timber or glue laminated, but also in paneling that references the way we utilize materials like bark coverings and mat coverings traditionally. So the space is designed to be flexible. So on the left, you'll see a gallery setup, but those panels can be retracted and can be turned into a space for meetings, etc. On the right is the inclusive circle room, where featuring not only those archaeological elements, but also this active, curated screens above both audio and visual that can be adapted for different purposes. At the center, you can't quite see it, but there's Turtle. Turtle is embedded in the floor to talk about how, we relate to Turtle Island, some of the storytelling about creation. And there's an aperture in the ceiling that shines on Turtle to represent Sky Woman, that connection between sky and earth, and the presence of creation being part of this space. Some of you may be familiar with this. I'm sure Ron has talked about this project at Mohawk College, Ron McClester. It's one project we actually worked on with him during his tenure there, the hoop dance. And so this project has some of the similar elements you'll see at Algonquin, but really emphasizing the idea of the 13 moons, these 13 hoops. The idea of the acknowledging the solstice with the directions, the medicine wheel at top, similar to Algonquin, having an active and a passive ability to host events, to be part of the everyday experience of the college. And elements as part of this gathering space are the Three Sisters planting, the water, and also medicinal gardens that supplement the agricultural gardening. And then, you know, space to spill out. So this project has evolved a little bit. And this is kind of showing how it's aged. You know, the wood does gray, and you probably see some of that at Algonquin. But we were asked to incorporate a seasonal enclosure so that it could be extended. So there's a fire at the center. And so I think it was always designed as such to support an additional load. And so in in the last couple of years, we were developing this pseudo tent or teepee-like structure that's supported by the upper rings to extend the use of the space. And, you know, things have been modified, things have changed, the planting of the cedars, and you can see how the gardens have kind of been, you know, overgrown in a way. So, you know, these places have lives that are beyond the initial, you know, design intents. And so it's really interesting to see how spaces get used by clients as we move forward. The Indigenous Cultural Markers Project at Humber College was a project that was about land, but also about art, about marking Indigenous presence. And so there were 3 projects involved in this project. One was an interior installation at the North Campus within the Barrett Center for Technology. That's this building here. There were 2 others at the Lakeshore campus that were more outdoor experiences. So this one at the Barrett Center, which we've named the Anishinaabe Dizu and Mikana, the life path, is representative of ourselves as human beings from an Anishinaabe perspective. So there are 7 wooden forms that are on the sculpture, each form representing a stage in our lives, you know, beginning at the bottom and working way up. And so we developed the patterning on the marker to denote things like the clan system, vegetation related to sustenance, shelter, technology like the canoe, and ceremonial items like the Migas shell, which features prominently in our storytelling, as well as at the top, the Thunderbird. So as we move from the base to the upper portion, there's this connection at the center, this glowing center part representative of the spirit. And it being part of the technology building and program, we knew we had to build in a more active element. So this center portion is infinitely programmable in terms of light, color, speed, temperature. So it can change, you know, subtly, quickly. And so the idea is that students would be able to engage with this, with this installation in that way to you know, play around with programming, or it could be programmed for events like solstices, or things like, you know, a special event, let's say for a third Thursday or something similar, you know, to signal that there's something going on that's important. And at the same time, we also built in a sound system so that that could be used, that there could be a projection if there was something going on in this space. So it has that kind of audio component. At the base, you'll see this kind of spiral of color. So that's representative of the 7 fires of creation, as was shared with us by the elders. And so as it spirals the structure and comes into the center, the last fire is us, the human being. And so that's what is coming out of this form. And that zigzag that you see connecting all the forms, that's representative of our life path. So you'll see it in actually many cultures, and sometimes it's denoted as energy line, sometimes it represents water. But in this case, we've utilized it as another representation of that life, our lives, our path that we travel. And so those deviations on the path, you know, represent those, you know, transitions into those parts of our life. At the Lakeshore campus, we wanted to be able to feature a few things. One was the sweat lodge, or lodge in general, this kind of structure that could support seating, could support teaching, but also had some reference to those cultural buildings and structures. So it faces east. The seating node that's outbound is representative of the altar that would be part of the sweat lodge. And so it was kind of loosely based on that kind of concept of lodge, but being able to share in this space, I think, was the primary driver. And these vertical elements that run along the courtyard, you'll see here, these markers spoke to specific places along the Carrying Place Trail, which is trail linking Lake Ontario to Lake Simcoe. And the elders wanted us to highlight original place names as part of that. So this just gives you a view of the courtyard at Humber, and those markers, they're a little bit small here, but there's 3 on this side and 4 on this side. So they kind of bracket it, the central grassed area, and then here's the gathering place. There's a shot of the markers. So, restoring original names, this is in Etobicoke, but in our language, it's Adobiguk, the place of the alders. And there's other places like Ishpadina or Spadina, referencing the high hill, the place of Toronto. Another representation that we wanted to bring to the site at the Welcome Center was the migration story. So a story that links us in terms of the Anishinaabe or Algonquin people, and our migration from the East Coast inland. There's storytelling that relates to each stopping place along the way, one of being around Montreal, one being Niagara Falls, and there are others like Sault Ste. Marie and beyond to the tip of Lake Superior. So it's really to say that there's movement historically, but there's movement and connection both east and west, and wherever we have our relations. So that relationship maintenance is important, and we are spread out quite a bit across the country. And we also wanted to feature some of the clan symbology related to clans of the area. So that's what you see, these little embedments here within the concrete. We also featured, so that's the Welcome Center in the background, and so this just gives you a sense of these bronze embedments, each one speaking to the topography of the each of the stopping places along the way. We also featured the clan system. I mentioned the clan system. It's different Indigenous groups have utilized the clan system. Some don't. For Anishinaabe, there are many clans beyond these 7 original clans, but we wanted to be able to feature those 7 as a way to say that we all have a clan as human beings. We all have gifts and responsibilities, not only to the other clans, but to each other and to the land itself. So it's important that, and it also formed our original way of governing, so that there was an equity across the community in terms of saying everyone has a place, everyone has a role, and therefore everyone has a voice. This is a very different looking Algonquin College. Some of you are probably much more familiar with when it looked this way. This is the day that we started, and this was in October of 2016. This was Caring for the Spirit, and I don't know if some of you were there for that ceremony. It was the first snow of that year, and also one of the first, if not the first, sacred fires on campus. I keep getting confused whether or not that is the story or not, but it was a sacred fire that was held to start and kick off this project in terms of the formal architectural and landscape process. So for me, it was a really powerful way to start and to connect with the land, to connect with Algonquin College, and to begin that connection with community in a real way. And so I had a small speaking part as part of that. ceremony, but this is just really a really beautiful reminder to me of where we started, where I started, and jumped into the process and energy that's gone into this project. And of course, I feel always like I had the best job, the easy job in terms of doing what I do in terms of designing. But really the support that was the support from Algonquin College, from Andre, from Ron, who really, had some of those relationships started, allowed me to come in and help them out in a good way to see this project forward. So it's really, while it was a big responsibility, it also, just reminds me of how grateful I am to be able to work in that way. I think it's a critical point when you have strong Indigenous leads on, the client side of the project. It helps things to move more smoothly. It helps understanding to get to a further place very quickly, and allows that understanding to really inform the design process in an iterative way. We can talk about things on the same level very quickly. And so, having traveled to some of the communities like Kitigan ZV and Pikwakanigan, really enhanced that, those design inspirations for the project. And of course, it's very different now, as we know, and the beautiful addition that was done by Diamond Schmidt and Kuhachi. And so we were part of that team, advising not only on landscape, but the interior, some of the interior portions. Just checking the time to make sure I'm rolling here. But really, that site that we held that first fire is the site of where every fire in the future will be held. And I think that's a really powerful part of this story, that, the elder having to bring in his metal pan to be able to hold a fire here, and now having a place where it can be, always present and part of the college. So, as Andre talked about, the water that comes down the column and feeds the rain garden that's around the structure, absolutely part of the story in terms of speaking of the importance of water, our relationship to water, not just as human beings, but as those of the Anishinaabe Nation, other Indigenous nations, the use of water as a conveyance system for travel, for trade, for sustenance, and the different phases of water, and how it's used seasonally. So being able to speak about water, having water present is important, not only culturally, but just as human beings, to acknowledge these things, because they're often, tucked away and hidden. So being able to see the runoff that comes off the green roof, I think is really important. And I guess it's kind of silly showing you pictures of a place that you are in, but I get excited about seeing, how these things work, and just like the life of them. Some of the custom patterning that we did, which is present throughout the renovation, was really exciting to do, to look at how we can have an influence, not just in spatially, exterior wise, but also embed some of those symbologies throughout the design and renovation. This structure is really a hybrid of ideas, speaking about traditional uses of materials like wood and also the way we use materials like sinew to do strapping for snowshoes or canoe making. So it's a hybrid of ideas that really came together. This is why you have the weaving of the material above, and these tripod forms that actually reference fishing weirs as well. So really kind of many inspirations coming into one place. And then, how did that play out on the interior? You can see this kind of braided or feather-like or herringbone style ceiling. We wanted to announce areas where there was concentration of Indigenous design. We wanted it to weave throughout. So these are some of the ways that we designed within these spaces. And of course, the glass graphics in this one on the right, referring to bark, birch barks and canoe and technology related to bark. So, while the an old tradition was really, what supported us as Indigenous people in our territories to be able to access, to move, for any reason. And so bringing it back to the land as that which supports us. And then, the amazing opportunity that was presented to have the commons as part of the relationship to the Ishkodewan structure. Being able to have ceremony both inside and out, being able to have indigeneity, Indigenous space as part of the everyday experience of everyone, I think is really important. As I mentioned off the top, just having, people being able to ask questions about why spaces are like this. Why are you using these materials? What are these designs about? So it's not tucked away, that it's in your face, and that you become knowledgeable as you experience these spaces. And so it was really important that the commons be a flexible space so that it could be closed off for ceremony, so that it could be used for day-to-day activities, for events, for passive studying, etc. And we know that behind, or some of us may know that behind this space is a bit more of a living room, meeting room, kitchenette type function. This is really around conversations of facilitating community and providing sort of respite for, the broader and larger space. And I'm happy to answer any questions that we have after, but I'm just going to continue on. I have a few more projects I wanted to talk about. At George Street in Toronto, so what we did for that project is we convened a group of experts who were related to, that we had talked about as being the caucus. So George Street is currently houses Seton House, which is a men's shelter, but there's a large Indigenous population down in the area, and kind of forms a district. And so how can we transform larger things, not just buildings, but streetscapes, into Indigenous place? And so this is just a rendering showing how that might unfold. The Center for Indigenous Entrepreneurship and Innovation is actually housed in this condo. And these fins that you see here on the building are representative of different Indigenous storytelling elements. And those are built now. And so is this condo building, but the streetscape is not. So this is what we're imagining into this space, featuring Indigenous plantings, markers that talk about storytelling, and this super graphic of paving that weaves its way up the entire block and the street, informing where the planting is. So this is kind of a scaling up of how indigeneity can unfold in larger spaces. So that there's something different when you're approaching it. And so this more organic feel is kind of the ever-present element. This is where it all started for me when I was a young designer. This is in Thunder Bay, the Spirit Garden. It was my first, I guess, major architectural project. And it was actually before I even graduated. So I was finishing up my thesis and also designing at the same time. So really fortunate to be able to have an impact on the city where I grew up, and to be able to transfer the knowledge that I had started to learn, not only culturally, but also architecturally, and translate that into design. So while these photos are quite old actually, and the structure itself again has that graying effect, and so do I. But it's nice to still return to the place where my career had started, and to continue to experience it. So the Spirit Garden itself is located on this kind of false peninsula at the waterfront. And when I was a kid growing up there, there wasn't anything other than boats and the CP station and some parking lots and a pathway. And now it's been developed into a cultural destination with not only places to stay like hotel and condos, but also pavilions, restaurants, and a public realm design that is way more reflective of a cultural destination. So this pathway that existed before is now there's a destination here, and the gathering circle structure as well as the honoring circle. So the gatherings circle itself, we've seen multiple use, from pride gatherings to performances for theater groups to protests at the height of Idle No More, and people still use it in this way, from what I understand, as well as graduation ceremonies, So I think while we set out to intend for public space to be used in a certain way, again, it has a life of its own, and to see the varying uses of the space is really exciting. People have even sent me their wedding photos from this space. And then, how does the idea of storytelling play into these spaces? This is the honoring circle. So you can't quite see it, but there's the outline of the sleeping giant here in Thunder Bay, if anyone's not familiar with the sleeping giant. In some of our storytelling, we refer to the sleeping giant as Nana Buju, or one of our original teachers. That form has other names too, but because Nana Buju is credited with bringing fire to the Anishinaabe, it seemed very relevant that this fire circle would honor that story. And this red stone that you see around the fire circle is actually references the red stone that you find on that peninsula. So there's an automatic connection. And in the story itself, it talks about how Nana Buju transformed himself into a rabbit and ran across the thin ice to carry the fire back to grandmother. So maybe that was a really serendipitous moment of design where we could make those connections to story. And so it's used in this way as a fire circle for certain events, but has this kind of beautiful vista to the Lake Superior. I want to touch on just maybe a little bit of process and some of the kind of micro scale things that we do. So this is for a commercial client that we're currently working on. So on the left is a rendering showing this kind of boardroom design that we're working on. In the middle is the actual fabrication mock-up of this space. So taking our original 3D model and, they do their own 3D model for tweaking, but you can see that it's very close. So this kind of, the use of technology is amazing in terms of pre-visualization, but also even moving right into fabrication. So we have people in our team who are really knowledgeable about softwares, but also about the way things are built. And so on the extreme right here, you can see this sort of subtle carving that we've utilized in the wood. And this is done all via a script that is built into the parametric design parameters. So it's subtle in this way, but it also kind of enhances the design. Zooming out now and zooming over to Winnipeg, this is a project we're currently working on, a huge recladding and addition to Centennial Hall, which is 1970s modernist behemoth that kind of rests over top of a bunch of buildings. And so in this case, while it's primarily pegged as a library renovation, which is a portion of Centennial, it's also an opportunity to reimagine the building itself, which I don't have a picture of it, but is currently a very dark and faded metal panel. And so what you see in the front here, this zigzag pattern, which shows up in our work quite a bit, is this reference to not only the life path, but the way we're patterning the cladding to look at the way traditionally quill work would have been used. So in a similar way, treating it like units of quill work or in some cases beadwork, and really emphasizing this new entry. So while this project is just sitting in the design development stage, so it's kind of midstream, seeking funding for construction documentation. On the right, paint is a way that we can easily start to refresh spaces. And so this patterning that we developed on the exterior, we started to bring into the building already in this form of cladding. And so you can, or in this form of painting, so you can see the kind of structure that we're working with, picking up on that geometry and embedding, a color palette that relates to some of the things we're trying to communicate. So things are already starting to change. And so exciting little ways that we can start this process. I'm gonna end on this project, and I won't say too much about it because we have a video we can show, but the Awen Gathering Place in Collingwood, similar to the types of structures we've been working on, but again, a real focus on Anishinaabe language. Each one of these platforms has one of the 7 teachings on it in the language. And each one of these platforms above, or these canopies, has a different pattern relating to a different level of the food forest. So from the canopy of the trees down to the ground, each one referring to that relationship of all those things within that circle. And this just gives you a sense of some of the lighting during the day and during the night. And then a little bit of a shot from opening day. So maybe if we could pause there and we'll show the video. It's about 10 minutes. I think we're still good to go on that. And then we'll return for Q&A.
We are trying to make sure that the next 7 generations that are coming behind us, so these are children that aren't even on the earth yet, spirits that aren't even born. We want to make sure that we leave them something that is full of love, full of wisdom, full of honesty, full of humility, full of bravery, full of respect, and of course, full of truth. So the gathering circle is really about awakening that truth. When we ask that question of what brings us here, it's really spirit of our ancestors that wants us to come together in that circle to share, to learn, and to pass that knowledge on.
And it would represent a kind of a reconciliation to the land and the people who had made Collingwood their home for generations and generations before contact.
Duke is a very, very dynamic knowledge keeper for Indigenous people. He's a Saugeen Ojibwe elder, and he really had this kind of story that he developed, connecting the 7 teachings of the grandfathers to the 7 canopies of the food forest, and it was a compelling idea.
Those 7 grandfather teachings that are part of the canopy: wisdom, love, respect, honesty, humility, courage, and of course, truth.
We had a great conversation, and he was intrigued, and he spoke to Cal, and he said, is there any way you can incorporate those kinds of teachings?
We really didn't know how it was going to manifest until Cal took it from Duke to his Indigenous designers inside of the Brooke McElroy organization. And from there, we got the design that became a reality.
We try and identify opportunities in these projects for Indigenous placemaking, restoring Indigenous presence, and make sure that that work is actually being done by Indigenous practitioners.
And we had Indigenous designers who were working on the patterning aspects and some of the form work as well, and providing sort of advisory as the project went on, so that ideas that are coming out could be fed back to the design team, and there was a back and forth on it.
It's actually the vision and the execution of restoring Indigenous presence.
I think in the beginning we sort of started with the idea of a canopy structure and a pole structure. And at first we kind of had things sort of on one level, but then as we progressed, we wanted to have something that felt less uniform. You know, the way that the columns are sort of tilted and off kilter, and the way that the panels on top are folded. Part of that is structural, but part of that is also giving some differentiation to each piece. And you know, it looks like a forest in some regard.
It's all computer-controlled cutting machines. So it comes to the machine behind me here, which is a plasma cutter, and those files get turned into cuts in the actual steel.
For welding, each canopy, there's 7 canopies in the whole project. They take about 30 to 35 hours of fitting and welding.
We'll actually bring in a crane and drop the steel pieces on top and fasten them all together.
I mean, as a landscape architect, you know, my chosen medium is the natural environment. So, I mean, it's really interesting to hear Duke talk about the First Nations, the importance of the sustenance in the kind of living within those natural environments as a way of sustaining your culture.
In bringing these waterfronts back in as public spaces or parks, how do we also bring the land back to health?
The future is not in how much oil you can take out of the ground, but how best you can take care of and sustain the environment that we have now and the beautiful earth that we have, and we need to realize and understand that sustainability is the way of the future.
We're trying to renaturalize the berm. We're trying to bring the forest back into the site. So we've done, you know, through the build, we've provided a naturalization planting on the slopes.
So as we went through this summer of both just analyzing the space, building the design, and then beginning on construction, and we were also at the same time trying to figure out how to mobilize and organize 450 steelworkers, and not only did steelworkers bring labor, but they also brought cash to the project.
We were excited about it, although I told them at the time it's a pretty ambitious project for such a short period of time. And the steelworkers specifically will build the pathway leading up to it. It's sort of our version of the pathway to reconciliation.
I think the result is not an unprecedented, but a really interesting piece where you have multiple Indigenous designers feeding into a project. There's something magical that happens when you do have that kind of gathering of Indigenous designers.
So my hope is that by creating a space where the stories can be told and where recognition can occur, that will encourage dialogue. Dialogue will create reconciliation, because I think it has to start with recognition.
Today, we have gathered to witness the official opening of the Awan Gathering Circle. Reminiscent of the Parthenon in Athens, but totally indigenous in its rendering, an example of collaboration and community that invites young and old alike to bathe in the embrace of its shelter and the ambience of its hospitality.
it really is about spirits coming home. And so we woke those ancestors up. And even though we have quite some distance to go where that relationship will be balanced in a very beautiful way, we understand that the relationship has started to walk together side by side again.
You know, architecture can only go so far. It's really the processes that build meaningful engagement that actually have an impact on people. You know, the story behind this is perhaps more important than the thing itself.
If we're all in that circle of Mother Earth, the most sacred circle for all of creation that's on the earth is all in one place. If we could start to remember that every individual belongs and that every individual is a part of something greater, then all of a sudden we start to realize that we're all kind of one and the same.
Great, thank you for showing that. Realize we're a little bit over time, so you can cut it out at any time. I just had my last slide that I wanted to bring up to say thank you for having me today, Miigwech. And this little image here of my kids, I took them to Humber, just kind of visiting some family, and they naturally took their shoes off and started walking this path, you know, the symbolic path of our migration. So it was pretty special to see them engaged with our work in that way. So, Miigwech.
Thanks, Ryan. I know that we do actually just have a few minutes. If anyone does have any questions, you can put them into the chat. And I know also that you had been answering a couple of the questions while the video was on, which is great. So if anyone does have any questions, you can put them in the chat. And I know that I think for most of us at Algonquin, we probably didn't know all the symbolism and the story behind the building that you showed us. So I think that was really interesting. And I teach in the architecture program, so we're talking about this a lot in our program, but do you have ideas like for people who want to like learn more about this or resources that they could use or anything like that you recommend?
If you're speaking specifically about Indigenous architecture, is that right?
Well, in my case, I'm thinking of it from an architecture standpoint because that's what I teach, but I know that there's some other people at the college, like from communications, that have talked about this as well. So maybe just in general, but I'm looking at it from the architecture standpoint.
Yeah. No, I think there was a great documentary that was done recently about Indigenous architects called, I think it's from Earth to Sky. I sent it to Amanda, and she may have shared that around, but that was done really recently. And you know, what we've done is over the number of years, the Indigenous architects of Canada have formed a relationship with other Indigenous architects around the world. So particularly in Australia and New Zealand. And New Zealand is a really interesting opportunity to understand how indigeneity can be applied to the public realm in a really meaningful way. I feel like they're a bit ahead of us here in Canada. So, you know, they have a set of design principles called the Tiaranga design principles out of the city of Auckland. And so that would be a really, to just show how they engage in projects or how they put themselves forward in terms of honoring people of place, talking about relationship to the land, and, you know, embedding indigeneity in every project, which is something we see in many projects, RFPs that come out now. So that documentary, and then looking at how other areas have started to inform Indigenous design implementation, I think is really helpful.
I just see too that Amanda Salvi actually posted the link for the Earth to Sky video, and I have watched it as well. So I think I thought it was great. So your description was good. So for other people who are interested, the link is in the chat. And are there any other questions from anyone?
There's a question from Chris Hahn in the chat. I'll just read it. Were you part of, sorry, you were part of a CBC article a while ago about the continued desire to increase the number of Indigenous architects working in the realm. And I'm curious if that is changing now. Your work is amazing. Love it.
So I guess particular to Manitoba, which, you know, I can speak to because I'm here, the Indigenous Design and Planning Student Association, IDIPSA, which would also be a good resource to share. You know, they formed a collective, and when I was there, we had a collective, but it was informal. And so they've actually put out a second publication that is available, I think, online, just speaking about student work. So there was, I think there was about 12 of them. And so that was like it felt like a critical mass in terms of, and it ran the gamut of interior design to planning to architecture, landscape architecture. And so it was about featuring their work. It was about touching base with, you know, professionals like myself who have already been working for a while, but it's really encouraging to see the next generation kind of stepping fully into their role. And to see so many Indigenous women taking that on. So primarily Indigenous women coming out of the faculty, rightly so in a, you know, a male-dominated profession. So it's really exciting.
And I know that Chris Hahn joked in the chat that we may want to pull you to Algonquin to do some teaching, but I do hope that we can continue to be able to have an open dialogue to ask more questions in the future, because this is something that we're all continuing to learn about. And I know that I learned a lot today, so thank you very much. And I'm going to hand it back over to Susan.
Awesome. Thank you, Louise. And Lauren, I will just ask you to spotlight me. There we go. Okay, so I also want to say a huge thank you to Ryan and thank you to Louise. I always say it's fantastic to have an expert that moderates those questions because you know what to ask when I do not. I really love the Ishkaduin space. And I really didn't think honestly that I could appreciate it more. I had you know, educated myself about the space previously, but Ryan, that presentation was really wonderful. The spaces that you're creating are really something special. And as Louise said, I hope that we can continue this open dialogue and learn. And what Andre was saying, that it's just so wonderful that it's an organic space and it continues to grow and change. And anytime that we are able to have an event out there, it always feels so special. So thank you for giving that to our campus. With that, I want to say thank you to everyone. I'm going to encourage anyone who wants to share any upcoming projects, side hustles. If you're looking for any collaboration on projects coming up, please post it in the chat now. But looking at the time, I'm just going to say a final thank you to everyone who came and joined in today and was a part of this conversation. And thank you to Andre and Louise and Ryan and to Amanda Selby for connecting us all. We recognize that December can be very busy for our students and our employees. So we don't do a third Thursday in December, but I'm already working on January's and it's going to be great. And so obviously we'll pick third Thursdays up back again in January. So make sure to look for the upcoming information on MyAC and the Student Support Services events webpage. Third Thursdays are always recorded and posted on the Student Support Services events page, so you can watch this after. Please share it with colleagues. The whole idea is that, you know, we're sharing these new ideas and we're spreading the word that more and more of our community can join these events. So with that, I will say thank you to everybody. Thank you for your time, and we will hopefully see you in January. Happy third Thursday, everybody.